Let's dive right in, because today we are exploring one of the absolute most captivating maritime mysteries in all of human history. Did the lost city of Atlantis actually exist, or, have we just been chasing a ghost ship across the oceans for millennia? It's a question that has completely obsessed explorers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly pumped to dig into this material with you today. Our goal here is to navigate the fascinating journey of Atlantis. We're going to trace its origins from an ancient Greek philosophical tale all the way to how it shows up in modern psychology and pop culture today. We're going to separate the hard facts from the sensational fiction and look at exactly how one single story managed to captivate the entire globe. Here's our roadmap for the expedition today. We're going to hit Plato's philosophical allegory, mapping the unmappable, the archaeological reality, selling the sunken city, and finally, the allure of sensationalism. Starting with Section 1, Plato's philosophical allegory, the birth of a naval empire. To really get Atlantis, we've got to go straight to the source material. So the whole legend supposedly kicks off way back around 590 BC. That's when the Athenian lawmaker Solon visits Egypt and allegedly translates these ancient Egyptian records about a sunken civilization. But the very first actual written records we have don't show up until much later, in 360 BC, when the legendary Greek philosopher Plato writes his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias. Now, for over 2,000 years, scholars pretty much understood this story for exactly what it was. But then, fast forward to 1882. A writer named Ignatius Donnelly publishes this wildly popular, totally pseudoscientific book that completely hijacks the narrative. He basically started treating Plato's myth as literal history.
Let's look at what Plato actually wrote. In the Timaeus, he writes about a mighty host insolently advancing from the Atlantic Ocean to attack Europe and Asia. But guys, context is everything here. Plato wasn't writing a history textbook. He was writing a dialogue about the ideal state. Atlantis was brought up specifically as this arrogant, imperialistic naval empire, and its whole purpose in the story was to be a direct, villainous contrast to his ancient, idealized version of Athens. This is the absolute kicker. For Plato, Atlantis was not a real place waiting to be discovered. No way. It was a moral allegory about hubris. See, Atlantis was supposed to be rich in natural resources, heavily militarized, and ultimately just corrupted by its own sheer power. And because the Atlanteans let their greed eclipse their ethics, the gods punished them by sinking their entire island into the sea. It was a cautionary tale, warning Athenians that imperialism and moral decay will inevitably sink a society. Which brings us to Section 2, Mapping the Unmappable, a global wild goose chase. Let's look at how history completely fumbled Plato's philosophical allegory, taking it as literal geographical truth and launching centuries of pure chaos. Now, Plato was actually super specific about his fictional location. He put it beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is what we call the Strait of Gibraltar today. But that hasn't stopped modern searchers from proposing some wildly, totally different locations all over the map. You have researcher Richard Friend using satellite rings and radar to claim it's hiding under the Doñana marshes in Spain. Robert Sarmast used deep-sea sonar to argue it's sitting 1,500 meters down in the Cyprus Basin. Jacques Collina Girard pointed to the Spartel Bank near Gibraltar. And honestly, my favorite one, back in 1885, a theology professor named William Fairfield Warren legitimately argued Atlantis was at the North Pole. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The sheer volume of theories out there is staggering. People have seriously suggested Atlantis is buried under the ice in Antarctica. They've linked it to the Bimini Road out in the Bahamas and even the Bermuda Triangle. German researchers hypothesized it was submerged in the Black Sea. Others look at the ancient temples of Malta. Literally, this lost city has been charted everywhere from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean. It is the ultimate historical wild goose chase for sure. All right, Section 3, the archaeological reality, resurfacing the truth. Let's plunge into the hard science and finally dismantle this pop culture myth. When you stack the myth right up against actual archaeological reality, the whole fantasy just kind of evaporates. The myth says a massive, highly advanced continent sank into the Atlantic Ocean around 9,600 BC. Well, geologists and oceanographers have mapped the Atlantic Ocean floor extensively, and spoiler alert, there is no sunken continent down there. Plus, the timeline is completely anachronistic. 9,600 BC is thousands of years before any advanced human civilizations even existed. The hard science is definitive here. Atlantis, as it's described, never actually existed.
But hey, Plato was a master storyteller, right? He didn't just pull this out of thin air. He likely drew inspiration from real-world natural disasters to make his allegory feel grounded. The most widely accepted theory for his inspiration is the Minoan hypothesis. This points to the highly advanced Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. They were absolutely devastated by a catastrophic volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, which is modern-day Santorini. It is highly probable that the oral traditions of this very real, sudden, fiery destruction influenced Plato's tale of a city sinking in a single day.
Moving to Section 4, Selling the Sunken City, the Commodification of Myth. Let's see how this ancient philosophical warning has been packaged up for us to buy today. If you want a perfect example of postmodern culture, just look at these fake, submerged ruins built right into the massive aquarium at the Atlantis the Palm Hotel in Dubai. We have literally commodified Plato's myth. We took this profound, heavy philosophical warning about the extreme dangers of military hubris and imperial greed, and we turned it into a luxury tourist destination. We literally recreated a civilization that never existed, just so we can sip cocktails and consume it while on vacation.
Actually, there are currently 2 major Atlantis destination resorts globally right now. There's one in the Bahamas and the one in Dubai we just talked about. Oh, and a third one is currently being built in China. We are talking about a massive multi-billion-dollar scale of selling a pseudo-archaeological fantasy. It just goes to show how incredibly powerful the myth-making force of the sea really is, and how eager we all are to just step inside a really entertaining illusion.
And finally, Section 5, the allure of sensationalism, the psychological pivot. Why is human nature so obsessed with turning complex realities into consumable entertainment? Think about it like this. There's a fascinating thematic parallel here. Just as we willingly pay to consume the fabricated ruins of a mythical sunken city as a fun vacation, our modern media does the exact same thing with true crime and morbid events. We have this deeply ingrained societal habit of blurring the line between reality, tragedy, and entertainment. We take complex, sometimes really dark realities, whether that's the moral decay of a society in Plato's mind or real-world systemic failures in a true crime doc, and we boil them down into thrilling, bite-sized spectacles for our own amusement.
So, what's the big takeaway? The entire metamorphosis of this myth is actually a profound mirror for us. It starts strictly as a philosophical allegory by Plato, meant to teach a lesson. Centuries go by, and it's misinterpreted by pseudoscience as literal history. Then, in our modern era, we reinvent it as global leisure and tourism. And finally, it serves as this prime example of how we consume the past through the lens of sensationalism. We literally use an ancient myth as a tool for modern consumption. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. When we look back at the centuries of wild goose chases, the satellite imaging, the deep-sea sonars, and those giant luxury hotels, are we really still searching for the historical Atlantis? Or does human nature simply prefer a highly sensationalized, deeply entertaining mystery over the hard, somewhat boring truths of reality? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I'll catch you next time.